All right. Broadcast
All
is
right.
live.
And
So
we
now we
are
can share.
live. Oh man.
Oh man, this is good stuff, boy.
Yeah, this is crazy. So
Now, how are we recording the stream though? I guess we're just recording audio, eh?
well, the stream is being recorded on YouTube. So
Is it? Oh.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yes.
So no picking my nose. No I don't know, jerking off. What else do people do on camera? Also, yeah, clearly I'm not going to swear for this episode if I can avoid it.
Oh, well, so we're live streaming on this. I think we should give them the uncensored version, you know.
Think? Well, not truly uncensored because it'll be half cursing from my end. It gets ugly. I'm telling you, man, I've been trying to edit videos from my like gamer days back when I was playing horror games like 3 years ago. Oh my god. Yeah. Like 150 censors across a period of like 9 minutes. It's unbelievable.
Yikes.
Oh yeah, you can see my finger, how fucked up it is. Look at that. I'm gonna lose that nail eventually. All right, let's get people in here. You shared the stream?
I am sharing the stream link right now.
Okay.
Yeah. From our YouTube account. Okay. That is shared there, and I'm going to share it on one more place as well.
Drew posted an Inking Out Loud podcast.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the triple chin. I like that. Look at me going in the thumbnail.
Yeah.
So just to be certain, everything from here on out is going to end up as part of an unedited video on YouTube.
All right.
All right.
Whoa.
Kept in mind.
Hello from Texas. Dana Lou Paxton is in. How's it going?
From Texas. How's it going?
Yeah.
I need to see my my feed here. What's going on there? There we go.
Yeah. So let's kick this thing off.
Cool.
And let's do a little bit of a recap of what we did in 2019. How about that?
Yeah, let's go for it, dude.
Yeah. So we published our first episode in oh wow, my face is really big there. We published our first episode in February.
Okay.
And since then we've released I think we're up to 46 episodes public now, as well as like 7 bonus episodes.
Is that how many?
Yeah.
I actually didn't count before we started. We got something like that, yeah.
Yeah. But the exciting thing with this is that I pulled the 2019 numbers, and as of the end of 2019, we have passed 10,000 streams and downloads.
That's awesome. That's incredible. That is seriously amazing. Like,
yeah,
if we had 10 people tuning in each week, I'd still be doing this. Like, that's awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, when we started this thing off, we were averaging like, maybe 200 a month for a while. And our listeners have really shot through the roof over the last couple of months here. So that's very exciting for us. It's been really cool seeing how it's grown, and especially in like the Facebook group, the amount of engagement we're getting, the just conversations that listeners are starting themselves and kind of having on their own. And that's what we want to do with this. We want to read books that are good enough and deep enough to inspire some good conversations, and we want to get that ball rolling for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's always really exciting to me when I see people actually talking back and forth in our comments, in our Facebook page, on our Facebook page, I should say. Those who are just ready with a whole bunch of questions when we say, hey, we're doing a live stream. And they're like, oh, I know exactly what I want to ask. And of course, as soon as we started the Wheel of Time coverage is when, we really started to get a little more traction. Of course, we saw that coming. Wheel of Time being a big series, being a very, very popular series. We did want to get a few few episodes out of the way, and I say few, I think it was 26 episodes out of the way before we decided to dive into the Wheel of Time, because we knew that, we wanted to give it justice. We wanted to treat it well. Not to say that we're professional reviewers by any stretch of the term, but we have a lot of reading under our belt, and it's been very, very fun to dive in for the 10th, 20th, 30th time and find how excited everybody else is around this series as well. It's been nothing but motivating the entire time.
Oh yeah. I see Pat, our sound engineer, has joined the live stream. 47.
What's up,
Shadow?
Pat? How's it going, man?
Um,
I need to give a shout out to Pat. Everybody, Pat has done so much work behind the scenes here, hours and hours, hundreds of hours, I assume, at this point, in sound editing and dealing with the terrible conditions I've had down here lately with water running through the pipes and stuff like that. I'm recording this in a rather dark and dingy basement, unfortunately. I used to have a studio set up in a side room right across the hall there, but we've had some family move in, and they've taken over that room for the time being. And it's great, having younger kids around the house. It's very warm. It's very exciting, especially at Christmas time. But in the meantime, my new recording studio is in a windowless basement that is this dark, even at noonday. So,
yeah, I'm recording from my home today. Usually we record at Pat's because he's got all the really fancy sound equipment and whatnot. But we do occasionally, some of our Patreon short episodes, since we have a strange schedule with those. A lot of the time Pat's not available, so we'll record at home and send the files over to him like that. But yeah, it's been a kind of a learning process for us, hasn't it, Rob?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot more to learn going forward. Definitely. Yeah. A learning process is the way to put it. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we just had another learning process about 15-20 minutes ago here where
right when we were supposed to go live, we had another opportunity to learn about the industry, didn't we?
Yeah, there was a little bit of cursing, a little bit of frustrated yelling on my end. I was unhappy with my computer for a while, but we got it working, so we're up and running.
Yes, we did.
I think on the topic of 2019, kind of looking back on what we did, we read a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of stuff, but not all of it. And so I wanted to ask you, Rob, if you were to do just the best book you read for the first time in 2019, what would you say it is?
The best book I read for the first time on the podcast or off?
Either.
Oh boy. I'm tempted to say Heroes Die. Stover was incredible to go through. I had obviously a bit of a hitch with Blade of Tai Shao. We talked about that in episode, I think 14, 15, 16, around there somewhere. For the first time in 2019, I think Skyward. I think I didn't get around to reading Skyward until 2019, a couple months after it had been released. No, definitely it was in 2019. Skyward, of course, on par with the rest of Brandon Sanderson's material. Just incredible. Just incredible. Starsight was only better. Yeah. I was very, very lucky. Thank you so much to my friend Drew. And through him, thank you to Peter for giving me the green light to actually read that thing a little bit early so that we could discuss it on the podcast. And that book was perfect. I can't think of a single thing that I didn't like about that book. So if I had to choose, I'm gonna say either Heroes Die or Starsight.
Okay.
No, you did.
I think those are both really good options. So I kind of did a little top five. With one honorable mention, but my number one, I'm picking. We have not covered on the podcast, but we will at some point. We have to. It was the first book in Daniel Abraham's Long Price Quartet, A Shadow in Summer. It blew me away. I had no idea what I was getting into with this book. It was like a free ebook download through the Tor.com newsletter, like maybe a year ago, and I just kind of sat on my phone for a long time, not really doing anything. I ignored it. It didn't even have like a real cover. It was just like a solid blue thing that just regular white block text, A Shadow in Summer. I was like, super low budget ebook. But I kind of reached a point this summer where we were gearing up to read The Wheel of Time, and I just felt like I wanted to read something totally new, totally off the wall. So I went through my ebooks and I saw that one. I was like, yeah, I'll try this. And holy cow, like first off, his prose is sparkling. I mean, he has it's not overwrought. It's not the really like thick, beefy prose that you'll get in something like Matthew Stover's writing or Rothfuss or something like that. I was
going to say Rothfuss, yeah.
But it's also not as like bare bones as, for instance, Glenn Cook. It rides this kind of middle ground, and what makes it the most impressive, though, is the kind of story. And it's a fantasy. It's a high fantasy. There's magic, secondary world, all this stuff. But there's almost no action. There are no battles. Like the closest you get to a fight scene is like this one character is like walking down the street and an assassin shoots an arrow at her. Like it's so crazy how intense he managed to make this story when it's just all about relationships. It's about friendships and romance and like what it means to trust people. Like it's crazy.
Okay, so it's a very character-driven narrative, you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's what I've started calling like a quiet fantasy. And from what I understand, I'm only about halfway through the second book right now, but there is more action, and it'll turn into more of a traditional epic fantasy as it goes on. But that first book was just brilliant. And then, so my second one, which it really came down to a coin flip between these two, was A Memory Called Empire.
I knew you were going to bring up Arkady Martine. Yep.
Yeah, I know you didn't love that book quite as much as I did, but
I thought it was excellent, but I wasn't like enamored with it in the same way that you were. Yeah.
Yeah, like I loved it for a lot of the same reasons that I loved A Shadow in Summer. That just really powerful prose. Martine has a great way with words, excellent world building, and it's all about relationships. There's more action in A Memory Called Empire than there is in Shadow in Summer, but it's
really there's more in A Memory Called Empire.
Oh yeah, there's none in A Shadow in Summer.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I remember you saying that now. Yeah. So, wow.
Yeah, but so that one definitely comes in second, and then I had Starsight third on my list.
Nice.
And then The Witches of Lichford by Paul Cornell, which is a novella that at some point I'd like us to do probably a Patreon episode for.
I don't think I've even heard you mention that one yet.
It's another in what I would kind of describe as this like quiet fantasy genre.
Sure.
Where, it's kind of like a British countryside small town thing where there's like a hidden world of like witches and spirits and stuff. And there are these three witches, these three women in the town who like find themselves battling supernatural forces that are trying to take over the town. Really, really good. And then my fifth one was Kill the Farm Boy by Delilah Dawson and Kevin Hearn, which is
waiting for that one.
Yeah, another one we got to cover on the podcast because it's hilarious. Like, complete satire of like D&D style sword and sorcery, like combat party adventure. It's so funny. I mean, it starts off with like the Dark Lord Toby, he who dreams of artisanal cheese. Like his whole research into magic is so that he can create better cheese and crackers. I'm like,
can't blame the man. I do love me some cheese and crackers.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. And then my honorable mention does go to Foundry Side, which we covered.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? If I'm going to pick an honorable mention, I feel like I should after that. Foundry Side might have been it though. Oh no. Yeah. A Wrinkle in Time. I love that book. I love that book. I love that book so much that when I was starting to write for the first time when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I was very, very, very cognizant of the fact that I didn't want to rip off the Wheel of Time too closely. So I was already starting to see a lot of those traits showing up in my writing. But without realizing what I did, I kind of flipped it on its head and almost, not word for word, but almost plot point for plot point, ended up following very similarly A Wrinkle in Time. I love Madeleine L'Engle. Like she was incredible. And just as a woman, like the life that she led and the accomplishments she made in her life, it was just, I mean, just on that alone, it's definitely worth picking up. So for anybody looking for like a short read, something you can knock out like 300 pages, it took you, for somebody like me, it took like 7-8 hours. Drew, I think you chewed through that in like 2-3, like you were flying through that one.
It was a very short read.
And of course, it's an older book. It was written in the early 60s. I think actually it was written in the late 50s, but released in the early 60s. So you're going to get a dated novel. You're going to get a lot of tropes But all in all, it's just solid. It's just such a solid book, and it's very, very family friendly too. So if you have younger kids that are just starting to get into reading, excellent, solid start with Madeleine L'Engle.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so if I'm going to ask you what your favorite book published in 2019 was, would you then say Starsight?
Starsight, yeah. Okay. Unless The Builders was published in 2019.
The Builders was not. That was
okay. And it's Starsight, yeah.
Yeah, 2015, maybe 2014, 2015.
Okay. Yeah, no, Polanski blew me away.
Oh,
he blew me away with that 88-page, 100-page little short story, whatever it was. I was actually reading on my little Galaxy S8, so it was about 120 pages on this thing. But
yeah, that's so great. I love it, and I really need to check out more by Daniel Polanski, because if that's what he's doing with his short fiction, I want to see what he's doing in his novels.
I hadn't even considered that. Oh my god! Yes, we need to. Wow. Yeah. All right. Moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I think next up, we got to go to the worst.
I really only have one entry, and you already know what it's going to be. Yeah, everybody watching this, if they've been following along every episode, already knows what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Jenn Lyons.
Yep. Ruin of Kings.
Right? Ruin of Kings. Or as Ruin called it on the Drew episode. Wow. As Drew called it on the Ruin of Kings episode. The ruination of the written word.
Yeah, it was really bad.
I brought on a no-name beer for that episode. A no-name beer. Up here in Canada, we have a brand that looks like a movie prop. It's just called No Name. And every single thing that they create is just a plain old yellow label with one big, bold, black word on it that says beer or says chips or something like that. And then it has the French translation, bière. And I on that episode, I said that beer tasted like the equivalent of somebody pissing on bread and then just leaving it in the sun for a day and a half or something like that. And let me tell you, that was very, very indicative of the quality of Jenn Lyons' writing as well. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's up?
Yeah, no, I just
you're like going through PTSD right now, remembering trying to get through this book. Like neither of us made it through this book. I made it farther than you did. I think I made it like 2/3 of the way through, maybe 75%, around the 3/4 mark. But I was already texting Drew that whole time saying, I don't know if I can finish this book. I don't know if I can finish this book. And then one day I got the message from you saying, yeah, I stopped already. I was like, okay, good. I don't feel so bad now. What about you, dude? Ruin of Kings, Jenn Lyons. Have at her.
So Ruin of Kings is not the worst book I read this year.
What?
It's the second worst.
Okay.
The worst book I read was, I made the mistake of clicking on one of those Facebook ads, like a self-published book.
This is my judgmental face right here.
That was like, it had, and the reason I clicked on it was like, it was some comparison to Mistborn, but not in a typical, like, if you liked Mistborn, you'll love this. It was a review quote that drew like a world building comparison with Mistborn. And so I picked it up because it was like 49 cents or whatever on Kindle. And
is the money still wasted? Is that what you're about to say?
Still wasted. I got like 35 pages in. This guy like can't even write. Like his like sentence fragments like couldn't stay in the same tense. Like just like functionally horrible writing. The book was called The Reach Between Worlds by Cameron Hayden.
The name rings a bell. You did bitch to me about this one earlier this year, didn't you? Cameron Hayden.
Yeah.
That's right.
It was really bad. Like at least Jenn Lyons has like a grasp of how to write a sentence. Like I had some issues with like how she fit those sentences together, but she can at least, write a sentence, and this guy could not. I mean, I would say his book needed an editor, but it was like, no, his book just needed a different writer.
I remember having a big problem with Arkady Martine, listen to me. Oh my God. No, Jenn Lyons. Let's not mix those two up. Jenn Lyons had her prose, I thought, was decent. It was solid. In some areas, I laughed outright. There were a few insults that one character threw to another that I thought were pretty entertaining, almost on the level of like Scott Lynch insults. They were pretty good.
Wow.
But the way that she structured that narrative, the strict formula of switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, with no spans, no stretches of narrative coming from one point or another. The way that at one point what made me quit reading that book was the fact that there was one scene happening in the future, and of course, literally mid-scene, I'm almost tempted to say like mid-sentence, it cut off, jumped backwards in time to give like a whole chapter. It was an entire chapter of context, and then it picked up again following the future scene. But the way it started off, there was an immediate line of dialogue that made no sense, and the following lines of dialogue also made no sense. And it took me forever to realize that they're continuing on a conversation that was cut off 2 chapters previously, and Lyons somehow managed to put an entire chapter in between there and then pick up with no context. None whatsoever on the next chapter. And so I was just left reeling. I had no idea what was going on. And there's moments like this just killed that book for me. I could not continue. It was...
Yeah. Yeah, I had a hard time with the transitions in that book, like not even just from chapter to chapter, but from scene to scene. Like it was super jarring. The thing was all over the board. Like
I think there's something to be said about the manner in which you consume this kind of content. For example, this might be like, Drew, you were reading the hard copy, or you were reading like an electronic copy? You were reading text though, physical text.
Yeah, physical text.
Yeah, and I was still, welding full time at that point. So I was listening via audiobook. And because they had actually a really diverse cast of characters, male and female, I was able to immediately tell these scene breaks from what it sounds like a lot more than Drew could, because for you it was just text, 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 but in the book it would switch from a male to a female narrator, and I had at least a little more context for what was happening. That said,
it wasn't necessarily like me having trouble differentiating between scenes. It was that like she had no like ability to bring the reader through scenes.
I remember you saying those exact words.
Characters would be like talking, having like a really heartfelt conversation, and then like from one line to the next, suddenly one of them is talking about something super lighthearted, and the other one just forgets all about the profound, deep thing they were talking about and engages with the lighthearted thing, and like doesn't even think about like, oh, that was a weird change of topic, or like, and then there would be scenes where somebody's, just talking, and then out of nowhere, this like huge monster threat appears, and you're like, wait, what? Like, it was super jarring when there was no transition at all like that. And then when there were transitions, they were usually very ham-fisted. So.
Yeah. And of course, going forward, my skepticism with that series, I've already said on an episode, I think it was episode 33, Ruin of Kings, I have no intention of finishing that book or going forward with any of the future books in that series for this podcast, barring something amazing, like everybody freaks the hell out over that second book. I decide to give it a shot on the side, and it's like, oh, okay, this might be a little better. But
so everything I've seen, like, or most things I've seen, the people who liked the first book have not liked the second book as much.
Wait, the second book's out already?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Remember, because she had that ridiculous publishing.
Oh, I remember you saying that that's where I was going with this, that she had that ridiculous publishing schedule, and that she apparently had like the next 2, 3, 4 books already written.
Yeah, like it's a 5-book series, and they're going to come out 9 months apart each one. So like
9 months apart. Okay, that's what I forgot. Because I was still expecting the book 2 to be out this year, 2020, or something like that. It's already out. Oh my God, I can't imagine somebody who actually enjoyed the first book and still didn't enjoy the second book. I can't imagine what kind of quality that turned out to be. It's just, I'm sorry, it's terrible writing. I don't know why Tor has apparently invested so much money up front in a series that looks like it's gonna lose a lot of money. I'm saying it right now. I don't know. I'm not a professional. I'm not in the industry in any sense of the word, but
I don't know. It's definitely an interesting thing to kind of engage with, because there was such a big marketing push around Ruin of Kings.
I remember.
From big time authors, all these reviewers on the Barnes and Noble blog and on Tor.com and all this stuff, and then nothing for the second book. Like, you didn't even know the second book was out, and it's been out for 3 months. Like,
yeah. See, everybody just saw my reaction, learning that the second book's already out. I had no idea.
Right.
I mean, in my notes here, I still have. I don't think I'm going to read that book when it comes out. Like, I don't know, but I think it's great that we do good books. But I think it'd be boring if we only did good books. I like the fact that we have, dived. Is that even the correct tense of that? I'm just going to use it. Whatever. Into a book like that. Dove. Well, I say if I've dove, doesn't sound right. Oh, fuck it. Whatever. If I was writing this down, I'd be able to articulate myself a little bit. I promise everybody.
Yeah.
Where
But,
are we going with that?
I mean, that's one of the things I like is, while we're doing a lot of our
that's right.
favorites, we're covering series like The Wheel of Time and Sanderson and Acts of Cain and the Rune Lords and stuff that came out years and years ago.
Oh, I forgot about the Rune Lords.
We are also trying to bring in some new releases, and so we don't know how they're going to be. Like,
which is why we brought in Arcady Martin, which is why we brought in Ruin of Kings, right?
And Foundry Side,
Foundry Side. Oh, that was a new release. That's like not even a year old when we covered it, right?
Yeah, it came out like late 2018, I believe.
Right. So it wasn't in 2019, but it was still recent.
Yeah.
At the time, it was only like
June.
Yeah, never mind. We were only a few months ahead of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But so moving on from worst books, I want to talk a little bit about like kind of the behind the scenes, because
sure. Yeah.
As we alluded to earlier, we've had some learning opportunities, as you put it.
I love the fact that you're calling them learning opportunities. It's awesome.
And so I wanted to ask you, like, what was your favorite, like, kind of behind the scenes moment so far with this podcast?
The lost episode. How can we not talk about the lost episode? For those who don't already know, which I'm sure will be some listening to this, there came a fateful day near the end of recording the Shadow Rising Part 1. It was a discussion that we had that was an hour and 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
But eventually it came to light that, unbeknownst to us, Drew's microphone had stopped recording less than 10 minutes into the episode.
Yep.
Drew, how are we feeling about that one? Now that we've had a few months to recover, looking back, how are we feeling about that?
No.
I want that noise looped right there. That's just the
It was like very, very few things in my life have made me feel like just that sense of hopeless frustration, like hopelessness, like, oh my gosh.
And that's when you had unveiled a very, very special beer too, right?
Yep. And we were able to salvage your reaction and Jared's reaction to that.
Because my microphone was still rolling. Jared's recording. Jared's microphone was still recording. But there at Drew's house, which was Drew and our special guest, Peter Goebel, both their audio was just gone. So we were able to recover it with my audio, my reaction at least to it, which was good.
And we kind of like re-recorded my reveal of it.
Yeah, we re-recorded your reveal part of it. And later that night, I want to talk about what happened later that night really briefly. You remember what happened later that night, Drew?
No.
So, I mean, I told you several times that night, like, this is something that happens in the industry. This is something that you have to accept going forward. We are going to lose content and we'll never get it back. Hopefully it doesn't happen again for a long time.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, Drew, it's going to happen again. It will. But I remember you called me over webcam right after that happened. You remember that? And then we spent like the next 2 hours drowning your misery with booze.
Yeah.
Remember that? I got, don't get me wrong, I got toasted myself that night. I vaguely remember like sharing a bunch of heavy metal songs like via YouTube.
Yep.
Right? It was an interesting night. It was a very, very interesting night. I was just like talking Drew down from that proverbial ledge.
Oh man.
And
I was so angry.
Yeah. I've never seen Drew that angry. Even the 15 minutes before we went live before this podcast, and I got to see angry Drew again. I love seeing angry Drew.
It's very rare.
It's very rare. But when it happens, it's like a green sunrise. You just can't help. You want to watch some more, right? But yeah, we did it the very next week to make up for that horrible loss. And again, I want to thank Jared. I want to thank Peter. I want to thank Pat for editing it. We sat down for, I think it was well over 3 hours. I'm pretty sure it was close to 4 hours of discussion, right? Like to record the Shadow Rising parts 1 and part 2 back to back on the same day to make sure that we didn't fall behind. So that was a monumental effort, gentlemen. It was an honor recording with you that day.
Yeah, that was quite an adventure. But my
What do you
favorite
do?
behind the scenes,
Yeah.
moment, a little more levity to mine. I don't remember if it was the Great Hunt 1 or 2, but it was the Great Hunt because Rob Winchell was there.
Yeah.
And we took a little break in the middle of the episode because his friend went and made like a Taco Bell run or something.
Yep.
And his friend came back in, so we're all like sitting down and eating our tacos, and the fire alarm went off at Pat's in the middle of our episode.
And I went, damn, how hot is that sauce, bro?
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I promise.
Yeah, we're like, down in the basement at Pat's house, and the fire alarm goes off. We're like, oh, like what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Thankfully, the house was not on fire. I don't know how the alarm went off or why. We never like found a reason, which is always super comforting. But
I forgot. I totally forgot. I actually still didn't remember it until you brought up the Taco Bell, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. It was a Taco Bell day. Okay. No.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Another. Sorry. Go ahead. You sounded like you were going to continue.
No, I'm done with that. That was just like I remember laughing so hard when we finally like got back downstairs and we're like getting ready to continue recording.
Yeah, and Rob's still here. Like, what's going on, guys? You okay? Like, shit. I didn't want to see smoke start entering the apartment or anything like that while you were gone. What else? There was the episode that when I started off. I want to say it was during the Wheel of Time book, but something's telling me to go back and check the Arcady Martin episodes, where I made my introductions, and then you know exactly what I'm going to say, don't you?
Okay. Angus McBeefy in the chat just said, "Why is Pat, the sound guy, always responsible for the background noises?"
He is. I'm blaming that on him. You should have checked the fire alarm before we started, Pat. That's on you. I don't know. There was an episode where I made my introductions, and then as soon as Drew, you took off for your weekly recap, as we do. Mm-hmm. Normally, I'm pouring my beer during that time.
Oh,
and I did that this time, and I now you know what I'm talking about. I reached forward, I poured my beer. I opened the beer, poured a glass, and then on its way back to my mouth, I dropped the glass, and it was a very, very delicate kind of pear-shaped glass that I was drinking out of, and it just shattered all over my desk, right there in front of me, spilling beer all over my keyboard, beer all over my desk, beer. Most of it went in my lap, and I spent the remainder of that entire episode, it was about an hour and a half conversation, just soaked in beer. Completely soaked in beer. But I powered through, everybody. I powered through because I'm not here to screw around. Our listeners are important, and I'll do it again. I don't care.
So speaking of beer, before we move into the next little part of our stream and episode here, I did bring a beer for today.
Did you? I actually did too. I just haven't opened it yet because I'm afraid that once I do, I have the bladder of a 6-year-old girl, everybody. I'll be running to the bathroom 12 times this episode. So I think I'll wait a few more minutes. But tell us what you've got, man.
So it's thematically appropriate, even though we're not covering a book today.
What? Okay, go ahead.
We are celebrating our 50th episode. So I brought a classic Doppelbock from Anger Brewery called Celebrator.
Oh, nice. I love how, once again, you still managed to find something that tied in nicely with the theme of this episode, despite the fact that this episode really doesn't have a theme.
Yeah.
I like that. Very well done.
And this is a great beer. It's pretty ubiquitous. People can probably find it pretty much anywhere that carries like import stuff from like Belgium and Germany. This is a Doppelbock, malty, a little bit of sweet, German classic lager. Like, not a whole lot to say other than if you like German style beers, go pick up a Celebrator. It comes in obviously this like very fanciful looking glass, and it also has like a little like goat ornament around the neck of it when it's on the shelf in the store, which is fun.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's awesome. I have to admit that I had a very big surprised face in the middle of your explanation there, because I just realized that there is a private chat and there are a live comments. There's a live comment section. I just opened that and oh boy, we've got like a bunch of comments here that I didn't see before.
Oh yeah. I've been kind of trying to keep an eye on it.
I was wondering how you gave a shout out to Dana Lou Paxton at the very beginning. I'm like, I don't see anything. It must be like a host thing. Nope, I can see them right here. What's up, everybody?
Yeah. But moving on, Rob, I want to hear you talk about some of your writing projects.
Okay. I'll tell you about some of my writing projects.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to grab another beer.
Good, because this is going to take me 5-10 minutes. Okay, so I've been significantly less open about my writing than Drew has for the most part. Like, I'm not sure I really ever want to pursue a full-time writing career. Or if I do ever, it'll probably only be for a period of like 10 years or so, maybe 15, but that'd be pushing it. I don't think I could focus that much time into writing only one style of thing. But I do have a larger connected universe in which multiple stories are going to take place. It's not going to be on the scale of things you see like out of Sanderson. Instead of like writing books upon books upon books, I kind of want to branch out a little more than that. I want to write like for video games someday. I would love to write for television as part of a team. I think that would be awesome. But I will start with, the books that I do plan on writing. So the first series, this is my biggest series. I'm tentatively calling it the Octillion Cycle, although that could change. In fact, you'll see later this is probably going to change. But this is a project I've been working on for the longest. I mean, it's my big series. I hesitate to call it my magnum opus because that's pretentious as hell. But if someday I do end up making a successful career out of writing, this will be my biggest work.
Okay.
It's ideas for this series have been floating around since I was like 10 or 11 years old. You'll hear that a lot with a lot of writers. It's undergone 2 major revisions. Both of these revisions were so drastic that it might as well have been an entirely different series. You can say that I scrapped 2 different ideas for a whole series before starting on this one. And this time I was about 20 or 21 when I really started on this one as it currently stands. So this is going to be a 5-volume epic fantasy set around 5 individuals who are all in their early to late teens, who are brought together by this shady individual who turns out to be the most wanted man alive. And each of these 5 individuals has displayed a particular talent with one of the 5 different magics, which isn't too uncommon on this world. But unknown to them, there is something special about how the respective magics express themselves in each of them. And the man who brought them together, he's the leader of an underground organization colloquially referred to as the Traitors of Men, may have stumbled upon a secret about mankind's origins, as well as the truth about an impending ancient enemy that's followed them through the universe and time itself. You could put that one on the back of the book right there. This is my biggest series, and it's probably a surprise to nobody that I've got the most work done on it. Surprise, right? I will say, I have to admit, confession time again, everybody. My writing habits are abysmal. They are terrible. I have this terrible habit of waiting for inspiration to hit rather than cultivating discipline and actually writing on the regular. But then again, spending these past 8-9 years working 40 to 70 hours a week in a metal shop hasn't helped either. Part of me worries that once I force myself to sit down and write, like the quality of the writing goes way down. But then again, there have been a few times when I did so anyway, and I found like major inspiration just waiting there to be unleashed that I didn't know was there. So, yeah, I mean, I have beginnings, I have endings planned for each of the 5 volumes. I have a special something planned for the final one. I'm assuming that was a great comment I'm going to read afterwards. Yeah. I've got major narrative arcs for about 8 characters at the moment. This a couple dozen tertiary characters are going to appear alongside them. First book is going to be a heist novel. It's centered around finding a way to end a war between 2 empires that's been raging for generations. Okay. I've got quite the finale planned and outlines, including major pivotal scenes for each book that follows. And as it currently stands, I have precisely 2 canonical scenes finished. And the reason I say canonical is because I also have a few others floating around that are test scenes, okay, where I just like throw characters together in a random scenario and kind of see how their voices fit one another and how they work off of each other. So, yeah, and these will probably be like the releases that I'll be including with Patreon content in the future. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, like I said, this series tentatively called the Octillion Cycle. I'm probably going to end up naming it something different and giving that particular name to like the universe as a whole someday, if I can find time to pump out everything that I want to pump out, which may or may not happen. Right. So yeah, that's about my biggest series. Now, how do you want to do this? Should I continue with my other 2 or 3 little things, or do you want to give one and then I'll go back with one? We fire off of each other.
Sure, we can switch off.
Yeah, go for it, man. I'm gonna read this comment that got you giggling.
Oh yeah, Angus McBeefy saying can't be worse than George Martin.
You can. It could be called Patrick Rothfuss.
Yeah. Oh.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah, I agree with Joy there. Sounds like Rob has been grocery shopping for his book ingredients and now just needs to cook it all up.
I like that. I really like that.
Yeah. But yeah. So my biggest project, probably as far as like momentum and whatnot goes, is a trilogy that tentatively is called The Chronicle of the Suns, but I really don't like that title. I just haven't, found something good enough for it yet. But the first book is finished. It's called All Flames Cast. And I am trying to find an agent for it, trying to find representation. In fact, I'm kind of going through another round of revisions right now. It's with a couple of beta readers in its current incarnation, which is the 6th draft. And once I get some feedback on that and finish up revisions there, I'm probably going to send out another couple of rounds of queries for that. The first round I sent out a couple of years ago went like pretty well, like about as well as it can go without getting an offer of representation. Like I sent to, I think it was 7 agents, and then 2 of them requested the full manuscript before declining to represent me, and a couple more requested partials. And that's like, that's pretty good. A lot of agents will just like, they get like hundreds of these a week, so they're not getting requesting pages for most of them. So I'm pretty confident about that one, that eventually I'll find a home for it. That one is kind of based on an idea that actually Pat, our sound engineer, came up with years ago. We were working in a warehouse together, and Pat just like sketched this city that was like shaped like a flame if you look at it from overhead, and he was like, what would be cool if there's a city like this and the people there worshiped fire. And I was in college at the time and was doing an independent study on the poetics of world building, and ended up taking that seed that Pat gave me and fleshed it out, wrote the first 3 chapters, and ended up, writing a 145,000 word book on it. And it's, outlined throughout the entire trilogy, but I'm just kind of waiting on the second book until I have an agent and an editor, because I know there are going to be substantial changes.
Right. And everything that, you don't want to have to be changing too much later, I assume.
Exactly. Like, it's how publishing goes. Like, I'm not going to have the book published as it is right now unless I sub-pub it, and I don't want to. So I don't want to write another entire novel that I have to go back and like rewrite significant portions of.
Don't pull a Jen Lyons, everybody, and write all 5 books before the first one's published. Don't do that. That's a big no-no.
Which is also what Patrick Rothfuss did.
Well, hey, you know what? Listen to me. If it's making you a lot of money, do it. She made a lot of money doing it.
Oh, yeah, she did.
Never mind. Take what I just said, flip it on its head, do it. Apparently, that's what gets you lots of money. Millions and millions of dollars nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, so All Flames Cast, that's probably the most developed thing I have right now, and I have like the highest kind of hopes for it. That was the third.
I read it. I read a draft of All Flames Cast. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil anything at all, but I do like some certain drinking scenes between a couple of the main characters there. Those are pretty entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Well, one of which is a main character, another of which is a side character, but they're pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I will say I had no idea that the actual city was shaped like a flame. I had no idea. I don't think you ever actually described that in the book.
Well, because you never have like somebody up in the clouds.
Right. You don't ever like a bird's eye view of it. Yeah.
But the way the city's laid out with the colors and the tiers, you can kind of piece it together. Obviously,
That's
like
cool.
When it gets published, there will be like one of the things I'm going to push hard for is like a full color map of the city so that you can really see, but
a couple of comments here I want to respond to from Angus McBeefy. Hamilton has each other's back. I'm sorry, dude. I don't live in Hamilton. I'm close. I'm very, very close. In fact, I've featured a lot of beers that are brewed right there in Hamilton, but I'm actually about 3 hours south of UR. Oh my God, I can't speak today, everybody. How is that different from any other week? Yeah. And also, I just want to give a shout out to Joy Spren. Joy, I had no idea you had such a witty name for your account like that. That's awesome. I saw that and I was like, Joy Spren, that's cool. It's Joy. She's right there. I had no idea. Sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead.
And Armando just joined as well.
I'm like a half minute behind everything else here.
Welcome, Armando.
Armando Urives.
Yeah, he's one of our very first Patreon supporters. So
thank you so much, Armando. Good to see you. You know what? Now that he's joined, I'm gonna open this beer. This is for you, Armando.
Nice.
Well, I like. This is for everybody, but it's Armando joining that got me started.
Well, so while you're doing that, I'll jump to my next project
kind of
that I'm kind of working on right now.
Yeah,
and that is, like, even though I'm not much for fan fiction, I was inspired a little while back. These guys, like, you know, amateur animators, made over the course of several years a YouTube video, an anime like Star Wars thing with, like, you know, it started off with just like little bits and pieces of scenes and a couple of flashes of characters, and it's just a space battle. And then over the years, they fleshed it out more, added sound effects, and then added dialogue and things like that. And it's really, really good. If you just Google Star Wars anime, it's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes long. It's crazy, crazy good. But there's one character in it. She's a female, like, TIE bomber pilot, and she's super good. You know, she, like, instead of bombs, she has her TIE bomber outfitted with, like, cluster missiles, and she's, like, shooting down X-Wings left and right. And I kind of loved just the idea of, like, what it would take in the Empire, as, like, laid out in the old expanded universe, for a female bomber pilot to kind of get to that point. And so I've started working on a novella about, like, her backstory, basically. And it's called The Scar, and I've written about 5,000 words on that. I'm targeting about 25 to 30,000. So we'll see. I'm hoping to get that done, like, this spring into the summer.
Nice.
But it's been a lot of fun. Like, I don't normally write fan fiction, like I said, but sometimes it's nice to just sit down and have all the world building done for you already.
Yeah. Yeah. On the subject of fan fiction, I've never really found myself writing fan fiction or even having the desire to, but there were times early on when I was, you know, struggling to find my my narrative voice, when I decided to transcribe my favorite web series, Red versus Blue.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, I don't know, a actual written story. Every episode was just like 4 or 5 words, where I was adding exposition, where I was just adding details about the environment and stuff like that, and trying to get these really, really witty one-liners coming across as just dialogue that flows with the rest of the scene.
What, like
what, like a puma? Exactly. No, man, it's Puma. There you go. Those. It was actually the first 5 or 6 episodes. So you actually nailed it. That was episode 2. What, like a puma? That was it.
Oh, like one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah. Oh God. And especially near the end of the episode, where he's like, I don't know, he's got some sort of vehicle there. It looks like a big cat. Oh, for it. Oh, like a puma? Yeah, man. There you go. It's just comedy gold. Red versus Blue. If you're folding laundry, you've got 3 to 5 minutes at a time, you want to have a few laughs, watch Red versus Blue. Those guys are genius. They're genius. Of course, I suppose you could kind of count that as a fan fiction, since it's using Halo assets absolutely to actually film that, right? But yeah, that's what I used to do with fanfic, just to kind of find my narrative voice. I would find things that only exist in one format and try to transcribe it into another format.
I mean, that's a really interesting, like, writing exercise. I think, like, as just far as, like, flexing your writing muscles and kind of practicing, that's a really good idea.
Well, that worked for a little while, and then I stopped doing that and just started writing normal stuff again. Yeah, I guess I'll continue here. I'll tell you guys about my planned sci-fi horror trilogy.
Yeah, go for it.
So this is set on a planet where, rather than pursuing magic for protection, mankind has sought to replace magic with technology. And this trilogy takes place in a land where mankind can only exist inside certain, I'm calling them safe zones, but I am putting parentheses around every single time I use that word, because I do want to find a replacement term for that. And these are large safe zones that accommodate millions and millions of people in each. But beyond the boundaries of these safe zones, past nightfall, there is a wave of darkness that flows over the planet. It's full of gnashing, screaming, horrible nightmare creatures that, believe me, you'd never, ever, ever want to meet. Problem, however, is that even though they have some seriously impressive technology, I have some really cool plans for that. The tech isn't a perfect replacement for the magic that once protected these safe zones. And after a couple of centuries of admirable work, the protections are starting to fail. And the main character, who I still haven't named, is a pregnant woman And
Oh,
because of this, I haven't started writing any scenes in this world yet. Because, I'm a 28-year-old guy. I'm single at the moment. I want to approach this with accuracy and solemnity. But for narrative purposes, particularly in the first volume, she needs to be an expecting mother.
okay.
Because part of the problem on this world is an imbalance of souls, I'll say, and certain people that lack proper defenses, such as an unborn child, are susceptible to corruption by these less than savory souls. So, like I said, it's a sci-fi horror. It's going to be dark. I don't know when I'll get around to writing this one. It needs to be finished before my larger series, I think. I may end up writing these in between volumes of the bigger series if I find that there's interest for it. And of course, to the astute reader, there's going to be some similarities between these creatures and the ones that threaten mankind on my other world. And there will be more revealed eventually. So there. I'm calling that one tentatively. It's being called, I don't know, the Nightfallen. These creatures are called, I'm calling them the Nightfallen, but that could also change as well.
I like that play on words.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my other major project that I'm working on right now is another epic fantasy novel that has sort of a twisting backstory to it. I came up with the world and one of the characters in it after watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, specifically the episode in season 3 called The Beach.
Good source of inspiration, that show.
It's that episode I think is the best episode in the whole show, and just the way it kind of explored each of the characters in this little group, how their backgrounds have developed them in the way they've turned out. And I sat down immediately after watching that episode and wrote a short story, and that short story actually is going to be up on Patreon this month. That'll be our Patreon reward. Anybody,
Sweet.
Yeah. Anybody who donates at any level, you'll get access to these. But I had so much fun writing this short story that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna write a novella about these two characters in the short story. And I didn't end up writing the novella. My plan was to write it after I finished All Flames Cast, and I had this whole plan. I had a vacation planned in Hawaii. I finished All Flames Cast a week before the vacation. I brought my laptop. I'm like, I'm going to write this novella on the beach in Hawaii. It's going to be great. And I got there and my computer crashed.
Oh,
so
as it does.
Yeah, the first time I opened my computer on vacation, blue screen of death. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But so I never wrote the novella, but over time, just thinking about this world and everything, and a couple of other influences came through, some songs that I liked the themes in, and then the idea at the beginning of one of the Halo novels, Ghosts of Onyx, the kind of the origin story of Spartan Threes, about these children who are orphaned and are sort of dubiously enlisted in the military to become super soldiers to get revenge on those who killed their parents. And so I took the main character from that short story and I made her this is 30 years later. So she's old and wise now. And she is sort of an advisor for this colonial militia who are training a bunch of orphans. And these orphans each have different magical abilities. And they're fighting an undersea threat, basically Naga. Think of Naga from Warcraft or something. And the book is called Under Vengeful Tides. I'm working through it. I really, really want to get this manuscript finished this year, and about a year from now, start querying agents. There are a couple of agents that the one of the guys who requested the full All Flames Cast, he turned it down. He said, I don't really have the answer. He's like, I like your writing, I like the book, but I don't really have the answer to what I think the big problem is in this book. So I can't offer representation. But if you write another book, let me know. And so I want to get this one done, and so I can send it back to him and be like, hey, check this out. I have another thing, and then maybe he'll be a little more willing to work on both of them. But it's been a lot of fun working on this so far. it took me a while to really nail down how I wanted the story to go, like which of these children I wanted to be the main characters. But I really liked what I've settled on. And so I'm making some progress there. I've written about like 25,000 words on that, and I'm targeting like 90,000 for that. I don't want it to be as long as all.
That's a lot of size. That's good for a first release. Yeah.
Yeah, like for a reference for viewers, like Elantris, for instance, Brandon Sanderson's first book, that's like over 200,000 words. That's big for a debut.
But then you have monsters like Goodkind who get paid $250,000 for a 310,000 word. I don't know if that's exactly how many words are in Wizard's First Rule, but
those
well over 300.
Those are rare. A lot of the time, a lot of agents won't even bother. They're reading your query and they see like 6 figures in the word count, and they're like, nope, too long. You get a little bit of flexibility with science fiction and fantasy, but I did have 2 agents specifically turn down All Things Cast because it was 145,000 words, and they're like, that's way too long. And really, the agents who read the whole thing were like, actually, I think this needs to be a little longer. You need to flesh this out.
I was gonna say at the end of yours that I think it should have been a little longer, but that's because I'm expecting the typical epic fantasy.
Yeah.
Right.
But so with Under Vengeful Tides, I'm trying, like, because the main characters are younger, they're like 9 to 14. I don't want it to be a YA book because as the series goes on, obviously they're going to grow up. But like the themes in it, I'm not like targeting for a YA audience. I want it to be more like maybe an Ender's Game sort of thing where they're like the younger audience can read it and enjoy it, but there are some things in there that are really tailored for an adult audience. So
interesting. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. All right. I guess I'll continue. I've really only got one. I mean, I've got one more big idea to share. It's my biggest one yet, actually. It's not going to be bigger than either of my previous series I've talked about, but it's the one that I have most planning down for. I would say it's like, I hesitate to use these words, but it's like the most industry ready. And this goes back to something I talked about really briefly at the very beginning. And this is a video game. This is a video game that I want to write for, and this is a horror game as well. I'm a little more excited to talk about or not more excited, less anxious to talk about this one.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it's kind of ready for development. If I could just find $500,000 lying around and get started on it. All kidding aside, though, about 4 years ago, I became enamored with horror games, and I never really liked horror movies or horror games as a kid, or even as a teenager, or even in my early 20s. I didn't really like them so much. I always, changed the channel, turned it off, found something funnier to watch. I don't like watching people die horrifically and just for the sake of just being scared. I never liked that. But then I went to school for film, and I had a whole new appreciation. I learned a whole new appreciation for horror films and horror games, because I realized that with how small those budgets typically tend to be, and how visceral of an emotion they can usually pull out of the reader or the player, horror movies and horror games really are, if nothing else, a form, like an expression of art. They really are.
Sure. Yeah, and I know you have kind of a soft spot for horror games in general. I know you've done a lot of streaming yourself playing.
Right, recording video games, getting entirely too intoxicated, and playing horror games and recording my reactions to these things. I do have videos on YouTube you can see of those as well. I want to say, I hold no illusions that I can develop a game myself, but I know that writing a horror story with a very simple premise is probably my best shot at attaining that goal of writing for video games someday. So I came up with The Tower of Infinity. Now, I'm not going to call the game that. Obviously, I'd shoot for something a little more extraordinary. But the concept and the outline I have for this game are ready for execution. I just need to start working around with Unreal Engine, which I have. You can actually download it yourself. A lot of people don't realize that the industry software for creating video games, the big games like the Gears of War and the Halos and the Fortnites and Fortnite, you can actually create these yourself if you know what you're doing. You have the software. It's for free. And I have the software on my PC. And I've been learning here and there a few things. But I don't know. Like, I need to start working with Unreal Engine and learn how to create these environments. And I, from there, spend thousands of hours creating a base concept, maybe a 5-minute playable demo, then try to sell this game to a bigger studio for production. I mean, this is all miles and miles and miles down the road, allowing for the best case scenario at every single intersection. But the concept, okay, so I'll give you an outline of the concept. Concept is this: the main character is a man by the name of Jonathan. And he is I was going to say his last name there, but I'll leave that out. He's a security officer for a large black government research organization operating under a false public face, as they tend to do in these kinds of stories. And his wife is a very high-ranking member of the organization's board of directors. And one day he wakes up to a distressed call from that wife, and he must fight his way through apocalypse level traffic to reach this building. It's a several hundred-story monstrosity out in the distance to rescue his wife, who is presumably trapped near the top floor. I mean, she's an important figure at that organization. In this building, he finds horror, right? He finds strange otherworldly beasts preying on people trying to escape for their lives. He's watching civilians, scientists, security, and even military personnel just horribly slaughtered as they're trying to escape. He befriends the building's AI. There's an AI involved in this building, and I'm tentatively naming this AI Eden. And the AI explains that this building is actually a test site for portals into other dimensions. And these creatures are residents of those other dimensions, and they're running amok due to a catastrophic error. And along the way, Jonathan must make his way against the flood of humanity trying to escape, to find his way through obstacles, as well as brief forays into these other dimensions, and to reach the top floor to find what happened to his wife. And of course, not everything about Jonathan is as simple as it seems.
Sure.
There are some hidden secrets, and I know exactly where I'm hiding those breadcrumbs along the way. But listeners might be thinking at this point, damn, Rob, that's an awful lot of detail for a game that hasn't been made yet. Are you sure you want to share this much? Yes, I am, for 3 reasons. Number 1, I love our listeners. I love you guys. I'll do anything. But number 2, more importantly, 2 and 3, I mean, I can prove that this game has existed in its current concept as I've described it, and much more for years now, going back. And 3, let's be honest, approaching sci-fi horror games like this nowadays, there's not a lot of whole original ideas. You know, a lot of these ideas in particular aren't very original. What matters is how it was executed. And I do have confidence that if I ever do find myself with a successful writing career, I will be revisiting this idea and pitching it as like a sort of medium budget horror game. Nothing on the levels of like your Resident Evils or your Silent Hills or your Alien Isolations, but more like along the lines of your Outlasts, your Amnesias, those kind of things, which obviously for itself is a tall order.
This
right?
does sound really freaking cool. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm not even a big like horror gamer, but this sounds like something I would be into.
Well, thank you very much. It's good. This is the first time I've told anybody about this. I haven't even told my family about this idea yet.
Yeah, I
You know,
haven't heard about it.
finding budget for this though, and finding obviously like this is down the road. If I have an established writing career and I'm making money doing that, then I'll somehow try to find budget to produce this. But for now, I mean, we've got to find budget to produce this podcast, man.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we're getting there. You know,
we're getting there. Yep.
We're starting to like get some traction and whatnot. But yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. So, kind of my next thing that I have up applies to this. You know, the Patreon thing we brought up, where we're going to be doing monthly like short fiction, you know, short stories, flash fiction, chapter excerpts from books and stuff.
Yeah.
I've been wrestling with a short story idea for a little while now. I was originally going to write it and submit to the Jordan Con anthology, but I didn't finish it in time for, you know, the deadline, and I sort of put it on the back burner because of that. But I have this sort of a short story idea that I would like to get up onto Patreon sooner rather than later. Kind of this idea of like a child, an orphan child who meets another orphan child and has to sort of grow up in an isolated environment with another kid, a younger kid, and kind of having to be a protector and like a father figure almost. And I was just like really fascinated, like when the idea popped into my head of like how to explore that, like a kid forced into like a mature role way before they're ready to do it. And this kind of plays into the same ideas that I'm exploring in Under Vengeful Tides with like all the orphans with their magic. But yeah, once I kind of like put the pieces together, finish putting them together for this, I think it'll go pretty quickly. You know, just a short story, so it'll probably only be like 3,000-5,000 words. But that one's top of mind for me right now. I want to like get it out in the next couple of months. But yeah, and then my last thing though is just like writing for Tor.com.
Man, you need to talk about that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot lately because I've had I don't know if people have seen on when we made the announcements of things, but I had heart surgery back in November and ended up back in the ER like less than a week later with blood clots in my lungs, which was just great.
Best place you could have them.
Yeah. But so I haven't done a whole lot for Tor. I've been kind of on the sidelines because of that, but I'm ramping back up into it right now. And the article I'm working on is an exploration of like how magic can impact like economics in worlds. And I'm using the lenses of the Rune Lords and Foundry side.
I was going to say, you want to dive into Farland on that one. Hell yes.
Oh yeah. I've written the Rune Lords part of the little mini essay already, and I just need to do the Foundry side part. So cool. Hopefully that'll be up on Tor in like now a few weeks. And then I have another planned article that I haven't started yet that I'm really excited about because some years ago, I wrote an article for my personal blog that was just like my personal favorite 10 finished, completed science fiction and fantasy series, because that's such a common question, in the forums and Facebook groups and whatnot. Like, what should I read next? I don't want to read something unfinished, Mm-hmm. And when I got hired by Tor, the first thing my editor said, she asked for like a portfolio in the application process, and she asked for like any website link, blog link, and I gave her my old blog. And when she hired me, first thing she said was like, so I read this top 10 series article on your blog. Can we brush it up a little and then repost it on Tor.com? And I was like, well, sweet. Yeah, I'd love to get paid for that, but it was also like kind of a double-edged sword, because I wrote that article for a very limited audience. Like I had maybe like 100 people reading my website back at like the peak of it. And I wrote that as like a pretty personal, like these are my favorite series. And suddenly it's going up on Tor.com, which,
right.
And
more than 100 people are going to see that one.
Yeah. There are like 280 comments on the article right now. And like one of the things like a lot of people like went after me for on that was like, all the authors except for one were men, and everybody was white, and so I was like come on,
it's almost like someone's skin color and sex has nothing to do with the quality of their writing.
Well, no, it was more like a lot of the things that I read, these are like my favorite series growing up, and it was like when I went into a bookstore and I looked on the shelf, what was on the shelf? Like there were a couple of female writers, but like in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, like there wasn't a whole lot of like variety, and the variety that I tried, I generally didn't enjoy. So it's like, of course, like this is just the kind of books that I liked. And that's changed in recent years. I've read like a lot more widely as science fiction and fantasy has like embraced diversity a lot.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that you're not like an angsty teenager anymore?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't really dug into the whys, but right. the like psychoanalyze the whys. But I sort of in reaction to the reaction to my completed series, I'm working on a like incomplete series that everybody needs to read article.
Okay.
So like going for new things, because so much of what I listed in my top 10 was stuff from like, it was like Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time, The Black Company, The Axe. Like these are things that were published in the 20th century, 20, 25, 30 years ago or even more. And so I'm going now for things that have come out in just the last like 5 years, stuff that there's maybe a book or two. And I'm going to try to avoid some of the obvious ones. Like maybe I'll throw in Stormlight Archive just because
I was going to say, yeah,
it's too good to not mention. But there are some other things like Foundry Side is going to be on there. Arkady Martin, the Tix Kalanli books is going to be on there. I didn't finish it in time. I came up with the idea with specifically Aliette de Bodard's Dominion of the Fallen trilogy in mind because I enjoyed the first two books of that, but the third one was not. But then third one came out this fall. But maybe I'll give that like an honorable mention. So those are my next two like Tor articles that I have lined up, and I'm excited about both of them. I think they're going to be a lot of fun.
I look forward to reading both of those.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And I think we should, because we're running pretty long here, we should transition into like some questions.
Oh yeah. Hey, I forgot we were doing that already.
So yeah, anybody, got any questions?
Well, we have a couple from the post already. So while the listeners who are live chime in on what they want us to answer, we could just answer the ones that were posted on Facebook previously.
Mm-hmm.
Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we have our first question from Mark Warren. I suppose we already did this. Have you thought about doing a year-ending / beginning episode? 5 best 2019, 5 most looking forward to in 2020. I don't think we actually have covered our most looking forward to in 2020 yet.
Ooh, I don't know if I could pick 5 for 2020.
I'm not sure if I am looking forward to 5 in 2020. I know there's 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean, Rhythm of War is the really obvious one.
How can you not say Rhythm of War? Exactly. Yeah.
Shorefall, the second Foundry Side book.
Shorefall. I keep forgetting the name of that one. Yeah.
That should be really good. I mean,
yeah.
And we had a lot of questions. I mean, if you go back and listen to our Foundry Side episodes, we had a lot of questions about
we did
how we handle it going forward. Like, because it was a very ambitious kind of first book and world that he built. So
yeah, sweet. Next question is from Rashid Kurugli, who is a Patreon supporter. I'm pretty sure he's a Patreon supporter. You guys have been reviewing books and series for almost a year now. How about you tell us of your life as a writer, which we kind of already went over, but he goes on to elaborate. How's it going? What are the issues you didn't expect to face as a writer? What are you learning from these struggles, and are you enjoying it as much as you thought you would?
Ooh.
Now, I'll just provide off-the-cuff answers for that. How's it going? I mean, you could listen to how I lamented my writing dedication earlier in this podcast. The issues I didn't expect to face as a writer, you know what? When I was in my teens and I thought I wanted to be a full-time author for the rest of my life, I thought I would have time. I just thought I would have time. I didn't think that life was going to just say, yeah, no, you really don't. Having to work 50, 60 hours as an actual job kind of sucks when you're something on the side and you need a lot of time, obviously, to write something on the side. So, I mean, I don't know. As far as what am I learning from the struggle? Set aside dedicated time. I'm terrible at following my own advice, but I really, really should follow that particular bit. And am I enjoying it as much as I thought I would? Every second that I actually spend writing, I'm not even noticing time fly by. Like I'll sit down and start writing, and it's 3:26 in the morning. When did that happen? Right? That kind of stuff. What about you, man? How's it going? Issues you didn't expect to face as a writer? Are you learning from the struggles, and are you enjoying it as much as you thought?
It's going, and like I say, life as a writer, it takes a lot more into account than just like me sitting down and writing, because I've taken a very long-term, calculated approach to building a career as an author. Like I want to do this as a living. Like I want this to be my job. But I knew, I did a lot of research, and I knew back in my teens that it was very unlikely that I would just like write a book and boom, here's a $1 million contract and you can write whatever you want and you can just make a living. Like I knew that it was unlikely I would get published very young, and B, it was unlikely that even when I do get published, I'll be able to immediately make a living on it. And so I went into college knowing I was going to do a creative writing major, but I took like kind of a roundabout approach where I'm like, yeah, I'm taking these writing classes, I'm working on my own stuff, but I'm going to find a career in marketing. And I did that. I built my career, and I'm like, I can write on the side. And my plan, was always just like, build that foundation up with a regular old desk job career. And then when you get your lucky break, you get your lucky break. And I didn't realize then how much networking would play into things. And I do now. And I've gotten very lucky that, I've been given some opportunities that a lot of people don't get. Like getting the beta read for Brandon Sanderson. That's open.
Super jealous. This is the face of jealousy right here.
Like that, I don't know if I would have been hired
envy
by Tor.com were I not a beta reader. And that's been kind of a feedback loop where I think I can talk about this now because it's like public knowledge. So last summer I wrote an article for Tor about White Sand, the graphic novels in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, and how there's the prose, the rough draft manuscript that you can get from his newsletter. And I kind of talked about like why I think it's underappreciated. That world, those characters deserve better than they've gotten. And a couple months ago, I got an email from Isaac Stewart, Brandon Sanderson's art director, basically being, look, like we're trying to do a collection. We're going to collect all 3 of the volumes of White Sand in the future, and they've announced that now. And he's like, and I want you to help us out with this. He's like, I read your article, I loved the way you talked about it. Like, I want you to help us out. So like, I'm
my man. Sorry, I'm hearing this for the first time. I'm getting super stoked about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a relatively new thing. I don't know when exactly it's going to be published, but probably, I mean, there's a pretty tight timeline. They're trying to get everything done by like the spring, I think. So, hopefully we get that like collection, which will like flow better and do more justice to White Sand rather than these like kind of truncated and like weirdly disjointed volumes that we got. And that's another thing. Like I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity had I not networked the way I did. And a lot of that networking like wasn't even on purpose. It was like I was just really active in the community. I love these books.
You still are. You are one of the most active members, the most recognizable members in the entire community.
Yeah, and that wasn't something I did on purpose. It just
couldn't have been, because it wouldn't have worked that way if you had tried.
Yeah, and so in things like JordanCon, where I've gotten to be a panelist there, and that agent that I mentioned earlier, who was like interested in reading another book when I read it, I met him at JordanCon, and I got to sit down and have drinks with him and with Harriet, which was surreal.
I can't believe that. I can't hear words trying to come out of my face. They don't come.
Yeah, it was like I was chatting with like Jason Denzel, the guy who founded Dragon.
Yeah. I read a novel of his, Mystic.
And he introduced me to this guy, Paul, the agent, and we were chatting. And like, hey, let's go to a hotel bar and get a beer. And Harriet just walks up because she's like super good friends with Paul, and she just sits down, like orders a brandy, and I'm sitting there like, what?
Just sit there. Don't look on your face. I want somebody to screen cap that. Everything stops.
Yeah, and like Lauren was there with me too, and we kind of just like sat there in silence, like listening to Harriet, because she's a very soft-spoken woman, but like, man, is she commanding presence. Like that's one of those things where Robert Jordan always said like, oh, like I took pieces of each of the main female characters were inspired by things about Harriet. Harriet totally has that Moiraine presence, like short, soft-spoken, but commanding. Like
really,
everybody shuts up and listens when she opens her mouth. Like,
oh man, I need to get my ass down to JordanCon sometime. Oh,
yes, you do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, so like I wasn't expecting the sort of like ancillary stuff around the writing career that I'm like trying to build for myself. And then I also expected, because sort of an offshoot of that, I thought I'd be doing a lot more actual writing than I have. I mean, I've still written a fair amount, but especially in like the last year or so, between this podcast and the beta reading for Brandon and writing for Tor, I've spent a lot more of my free time working on things around writing rather than actually writing.
Right.
So, you know, that's something I want to like find a better balance on, but I wasn't expecting to have to deal with that balance, you know?
I'm just now realizing that we're still technically on our listener questions. I thought we were just going off on story time here.
Yeah.
There actually is a second part to this question too. It's very much in line with the first. He just asks, what advice would you offer to aspiring writers, and what are the things you wish you knew when you started writing? And I can answer that one actually. Seeing as how I really only plan on pursuing writing as a hobby, and if all goes as best as it possibly can full time for a short stretch of years in my life, I'm not, well, and not having a formal education in the subject, I really don't know if I'm qualified to answer the question, but I'll still attempt to. I'd say follow the advice of far more experienced writers. Sanderson himself, he says, just write. If you think it's trash, even if you're right, which you're probably not, writing trash is still going to help you in the long run. For anybody that hopes to make a full-time career out of it, that's excellent advice to follow. And if I'm going to give one piece of advice, it's my own, not from the view of somebody who's overcome the obstacle, but somebody who's staring at that obstacle in the face and is at a loss for any way past it. Don't get too hung up on word for word quality of your work.
Okay.
The main reason I haven't finished a manuscript yet, if I'm seriously doing some introspective digging, is not the only reason, but it's the main one, is because I obsess over sentence level quality, structure of my set, like of my scenes, and pumping out another scene is just, it's hard. Before I know it, I've spent 2 or 3 hours kind of arguing with myself, obsessing over this single paragraph and spending 2 or 3 hours on a paragraph. Instead of actually saving that, shelving it, and then just continuing on and revisiting it later for terms of quality. And from my little experience, I will say quantity is more important than quality. When you're a beginning writer, quantity is more important than quality, because eventually quantity turns into quality.
Yeah.
But quality makes one. If you're looking for quality right out of the gate, it'll make you stagnate, because you can always find a better way to phrase something. And eventually you'll find yourself like Patrick Rothfuss, who I'm convinced hasn't released book 3 yet, because he's written himself into a proverbial corner with no way out. He's been sitting on that novel for like 9 years now, 8-9 years, something like that, claiming that he's still doing revisions and he's still doing edits and he's striving for perfection, never seeming to realize that with every single passing year, it only means that the book has to be better yet. So all he's accomplishing is digging himself deeper and deeper. That book's never going to be released. You're hearing it. This is my prediction right now. Rothfuss's 3rd book is never going to be released. I'm sorry. That's just my prediction. But anyway, back to what I just said. Quantity over quality. Because if something sucks, move on and write the next bit. Come back later. When you have distance from it, you can appreciate it objectively rather than getting too into the nuance and bashing your head like I do every time I try to write over making a paragraph sound prettier. So if only I could find a way to follow my advice, that would probably help me.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're really, really onto it there. First drafts are for, building the foundation. It's later drafts where you can, spend time fiddling with word choice and making your sentences beautiful. Like it's more important to, get to the end, write the end with your story than it is to have like the first page be perfect. Like you're never going to get to the end when you spend your time working on such minor details.
If working on quality was going to get you to the end eventually, I mean, quality can only turn into more quality. You can always improve on everything. Everything can be improved on. Even the best books that have ever been released, I bet you the authors that wrote them are still saying, oh, I could have done that a little better. I could have done this a little better. There is no absolute limit for quality. So sitting there chasing your own tail and trying to make something better and better just leads to nowhere. It leads nowhere.
Right. And the flip side of that is, what is quality to you is not necessarily quality to everybody. Like, there's no perfect book. Reading is so subjective that, like, if you get so hung up on what you think is perfect, you may be like missing the forest for the trees and, you know, forgetting about your audience. And but to the idea of like quantity leads to quality, that's very true. And, you know, because as you write just over time and then reread the things you wrote, you'll like start picking up on your tendencies and your mistakes and your crutches and things like that. But that goes hand in hand with reading. So I've always said that to be a writer, you have to write. Like, that seems like a really dumb, obvious thing, but it's super, super common. Like, you get lots of people being like, I want to be a writer, and don't actually write. I mean, going back to my like college experience where I was in creative writing workshops and things like that, like 90% of the students in those classes were kids who like wrote a book in high school and were like, oh, I'm a writer. I'm going to get published. I'm going to get my degree. I'm going to get published, and I'm going to be an author. And then they would go to their writing workshops and realize, wait, shit, I actually have to write new stuff. And they hated it. Like, you'd have students, like, they have a semester to write 2 short stories, and the deadlines for the short stories, they're up till like 3 a.m, feverishly typing out some crap because they don't normally write. They just try to coast on like one thing they have written. And that's like a big deal. Is a lot of people who say like, I want to write a book. They don't want to write a book. They want to have written a book.
Yeah, that's I feel that so much though. I do feel it.
Yeah. And so, but what you were saying though is like, when you're actually sitting down and writing, you're having fun. A lot of people, that's not the case. And so it is the first step. Like, you just got to sit down and write. And then the second step is, when you're not writing and you have free time, you got to read, because you're going to get better as a writer if you read and read widely. If you read one author, you're going to write like that author. If you read a bunch of different authors, you're going to start realizing, oh, this author does this poorly, but this author does it really well. And then you can kind of build your writing style off of what you're seeing and learning from. So that's kind of the second thing. And then my third thing is just be realistic. Like, it goes back to that college thing. Like, so many students had no plan for their lives. Like, obviously this is more tailored to a younger, like, aspiring writer audience, but like, the number of aspiring writers who go into college, get a creative writing degree, and then have no idea what they're going to do with their lives because the book they wrote once back in high school didn't get published. It's like, you got to be realistic. By far the majority of people who write a book, A, don't revise it, and B, are never going to get published. And so it's doing yourself a disservice to have all your eggs in one basket and no real plan about how to deliver that basket to where it needs to go. Like,
to tack on to your point there, read in your free time. Don't read one author, because like Drew just said, you will start to write like that author. And to use Joy's analogy from earlier, you can only shop for so many ingredients before you've got to sit down and cook. I like that. I love that one. I'm going to start thinking of that one going on forward.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Do we have any more questions to knock out of the way here? Going back to the chat here.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything pop up in the chat. If you have any questions and you're sitting in the chat, sitting on them, now's your chance. Otherwise, I think we're going to move into our outro.
Yeah. Let's see here. So as far as what we have left in the podcast, giving them an extra minute to write down something if they think of any questions. What we're going to be moving on to afterward is just basically, what's next on Inking Out Loud, what's coming up for 2020, and some of the plans that we have for the next year. Some that are kind of out there, some that are, I'm not even sure if I want to. There's an idea I had, Drew. I'll tell you about it afterwards. I won't tell you live on the air.
Yeah. Well, so as far as our immediate future, we're going to be moving back to the Wheel of Time. We're finishing Path of Daggers.
Yeah.
And then we'll be going into Winter's Heart. There will be a couple more of the Star Wars episodes interspersed there with Lauren and me. We're just doing the 3 Wraith Squadron books by Aaron Alston. It's, those are just like short little things, so we're not going to have like huge episodes like we normally do. I think the first Wraith episode was like 45 minutes. But however, after I think Winter's Heart, we're going to take another break from Wheel of Time, and we are going to do the first Witcher book.
Yeah, we are. Andrei Sapkowski.
Yeah, and that is a Patreon request from Danielle. So
shout out to Danny. I can see her down there. Fell Candy. How's it going, Danny?
And then a little bit further down the road, after we, we'll do Witcher 1, and then we'll do a couple more Wheel of Time books, and then we're going to do another Patreon request, and that is the first Deathgate cycle book by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I personally have not read any of Deathgate. Have you, Rob?
No, but I have a brother that talks about it on occasion. I think there was a game involved that he was playing a lot of. I don't know. It's something similar.
Interesting.
Something similar. Might not have been Deathgate though.
Yeah, the only Weiss and Hickman stuff I've read was like the old Dragonlance books, like the original Dragonlance. Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, and then their sequel series, like Dragons of a Fallen Sun. I think Dragons of a Lost Star, Dragons of Avenged Moon. Yeah, so I'm interested to see what Deathgate is all about.
Oh, Danny just chimed in and said that she read Deathgate in high school and she loved them.
Oh, all right. Sweet.
All right. Sweet. Sounds good. And on the subject, as we're talking about things we're going to do in the future, I have demanded that this year we are going to cover the Illuminae files by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Mm-hmm. We have a couple special guests planned for that, one of whom hopefully is going to be our artist, Danielle. And I'm looking to make sure we can see if we can get Mel on as well.
Yeah.
Who's a close friend of ours.
And that'll be partially new for me. I've read the first book, Illuminae. I have not read, was it Gemina and Obsidia?
Gemina and Obsidio, yep.
Yeah, and then after Illuminae, our current plan is we're going to go into The Black Company by Glenn Cook. And I forgot about that. Yeah. And we'll get out of that pretty much just in time. I think I have it planned all right, to where we can then do Mistborn and Arrow 1. And
yeah, we got to dive more into Sanderson. We have so much Sanderson to cover.
Leading straight up to the release of Rhythm of War next November. So we've got a big chunk of our year dedicated to Sanderson and Cook, with the first part on finishing up the Wheel of Time, and then we'll have some one-off titles, hopefully a couple of new titles in there. I think we're going to do Shorefall, the Foundry Side sequel. We'll try and mix in a couple other new ones. So,
right, awesome. I haven't seen any new questions pop up yet in the chat while you were talking. Oh wait, I saw Joy says Deathgate as well is great as well. I totally managed to miss that comment. I see. Okay, so we have another listener saying that it's actually a really good series. I'm glad we're doing it. Sounds great. Oh, and somebody said, I want to say it was Joy. I'm not entirely certain it was, but they wanted to make sure I shared my beer. I mean, this is one I originally was not going to drink at all on this podcast. As you can see, I've been drinking water out of this lovely little Frozen themed cup here that I stole from my little sister. But the reason I wasn't going to drink it all is because I have the bladder of a 4-year-old girl. I mean, I would be running to the bathroom every 15 minutes. So I did bring one just in case I felt like drinking. Half into the episode, I saw Armando join, and I was like, you know what? I am going to drink. I brought a stout. I just grabbed it out of the fridge. It happened to be there. This is a Broadhead stout called Night Shift. Night Shift. You can see it. Night Shift stout right there. I mean, it's pretty good. I'm not a huge stout fan myself. I do like the paler ales and stuff, but I mean, It's drinkable. It's a stout that I don't think is making me sick. Normally stouts make me a little sick. This one's going down nice and easy. And it's 5.5% ABV, which I know for you, Drew, is pretty small time. But, you know, as far as the beer goes,
it's 9.5?
No, 5.5. It's not 9.5, or I would be slurring my words a little more at this point. But, you know, brew notes, oatmeal. Oatmeal. That's what that freaking taste was. Chocolate, coffee overtones. I got that. Smooth mouthfeel.
Yeah.
Smooth mouthfeel. Marketing jargon there. But this year, like I said, it's Broadhead Night Shift Stout. Goes down easy for a podcast about books.
Nice. Yeah. Whenever you make your way down to Colorado, I will introduce you to the world of barrel-aged stouts, and it will blow your mind.
I'm gonna leave Colorado. I was gonna say I'm gonna leave Colorado with blood poisoning, but no, it's just I'm not gonna leave Colorado. I'm just gonna die there. It's probably what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps us up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and any patrons that are of the sufficient Patreon level, if you have suggestions for us to cover in the future, make sure you let us know. You can let us know via email if you have any of our emails, but most likely Facebook is a great way to get a hold of one of us. Just, you know, contact me or Drew, Rob Santos, Drew McCaffrey, and or through Patreon.
IOL Podcast on Twitter.
IOL Podcast, that's right. I keep managing to forget that we have a Twitter and we have a website, although you really can't interact much on our website there. But yeah, if you're a patron and you want us to cover something that you think we have, you know, lots of discussion around, throw it our way.
Great. Sounds good. And, you know, as always, I know some of the people in the chat are already on Patreon. Check us out, patreon.com/inkingoutloud. We're trying to support Danny and Pat for all of their hard work. We would like to see them more than we can currently afford. So, yeah, and that also helps us with stuff like hosting. And as we mentioned earlier, we are increasing the Patreon rewards this year. We're going to be publishing some of our original fiction on there, short stories and excerpts and flash fiction and whatnot. So check us out.
Sweet. Awesome. Oh, and this episode, like I said, I don't know if I actually mentioned it earlier. This is episode 50. And if this comes out in the regular schedule, I think I did the quick maths beforehand. This should be February 2nd. I think this episode's going live. Pretty sure it's February 2nd. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All right. It's been a great live stream, everybody. Holy crap. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. So thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.